Hello, coaches! Welcome back to another episode of Coach Better Spotlight. Today we have another special coach and coachee partner conversation in our short series, Coaching in Practice. Inspired by our previous episode with Megan and Jordan, in this episode I'm chatting with Erin Shelby and Sasha Robbins. Erin was Sasha's first instructional coach and inspired her to become a coach herself. I'm currently working with Sasha through our Eduro Learning private mentoring program, and her stories about working with Erin led to this conversation. This Spotlight episode focuses on the ways that Erin and Sasha worked together and how the relationship was built. In the full-length episode, we also chat about the coaching approaches Erin used when working with Sasha, the outcome of their work together, and why coaching is so valuable for all educators. To hear the full episode, subscribe to Coach Better wherever you get your podcasts. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to let you know that registration for our 5th cohort of the Coach Microcredential is open now. We only open registration for this academic year-long program once a year, and now is your chance to join our next cohort. If you're curious about how you can coach better with 26 weeks of curated coaching content, a private mentor, and a cohort of coaches to learn with, stay tuned to the end of this video to hear more. All right, welcome back to another episode of Coach Better. Today I am super excited to be here with Sasha and Erin, and we are connected because Sasha and I have been working together through our private mentoring program through Eduro Learning, and Sasha has been telling me all of these wonderful stories about her first experience with a coach who is Erin. And so we've been having these great conversations about her work with Erin and how that's related to her work with me and her work as a coach. And we thought we should all get on a call together and talk a little bit about coaching relationships, coach to coachee, and coachee becoming a coach, and what that whole experience has been like. So welcome, Sasha and Erin. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And to get us started, I'm just going to ask you both to introduce yourselves. Tell us who you are, tell us a little bit about your education background so we get a little bit of history about you. And I'm just going to start with Sasha because she's on my screen right now. So Sasha, tell us a little bit about your education experience.
Okay, well, I'm Sasha Robbins. I'm currently at BBS in Kuwait. It's Al Bayan Bilingual School where I'm working as a coach. I came to BBS 4 years ago as a teacher of English in high school. And I've been teaching for 20 years at least, if not 22, something like that. And I've always taught high school. Prior to coming to BBS, I was a teacher of English language and literature in Jamaica at Hillel Academy.
Awesome. And Erin, tell us a little bit about your education background.
Yeah, so I'm Erin Shelby, and I met Sasha at Al Bayan Bilingual School in Kuwait a few years ago. I spent 6 years in Kuwait, first in the classroom as a high school humanities teacher. Prior to that, I was a public school teacher in New York City, Department of Education, and so I was 9th grade government at a school there in downtown Brooklyn, School for Law and Justice. I'm currently in Abu Dhabi at the American Community School as the secondary curriculum coordinator. So a little different position, but try to bring that coaching stance to the work.
Awesome. So from your perspective, Sasha, tell us a little bit about what were those conversations like? Why did you dread them a little bit? And then how did Erin do things so that you were able to have that good stretching of self that you talked about?
He would come to the class, or he would do the videotaping. He would set, after a while, he would just set up the camera And then we would talk about it, what we had seen. He'd share it with me. We'd talk about what we had seen. But I think it's because he asked questions. The questions he was asking were, was about me thinking about the situation. How did you feel about that? And then just by asking a question, it led me to have one thought and then another thought. And and then you realize that your brain is kind of firing up. Sometimes I didn't have answers to the questions. And I think the dread came initially because I was still feeling like, he's going to see that, I'm not a great teacher. What do you know after all this time? Nothing much. I saw the dread came initially from that. The dread after that, once I put that aside, the dread was then about, what is he going to ask me today? What am I going to have to think about that I probably don't have the answer for? And so even if I didn't have the answer, I didn't feel like I was being judged for not having the answer. But then he would always be able to ask another question or another question that would then lead me to have a thought. And then that made it like, okay, so I get what you're saying. And then I don't know how he does it really, because there's this thing where he never gave me his opinion per se. He would probably ask if I could, if he could share, but it was more like, this is a situation, because he's asking me the question to look at the situation, then I'm seeing something that I cannot ignore and that I have to address. If I'm really going to focus on the interests of the students, if I'm going to focus on the growth that we need to have as a class, then I can't ignore this. Okay, let's dig in. Let's tackle this situation, Aaron. I'm scared, but okay, let's do this. But it's because he was always asking more questions. So one question, if there wasn't an answer to that immediately, then he would go for another question, or he'd ask me to reflect on something I've done before. And I realized, okay, it's not as difficult as it appears to be, but it was good.
So hearing all of that, Aaron, is there anything that you are thinking about? I guess my next question is for both of you. What did you learn from this experience that will be relevant for other coaches and teachers? And so then for Aaron, listening to all of this and thinking about this relationship, what aspects of that are really relevant or important for other coaches to think about? And maybe you have some thoughts on what other teachers should think about too. I don't want to limit you.
For me, I think it just comes down to questions and student evidence. I remember I think during our first year working together, our first time working together, I remember kind of a pivotal conversation that Sasha and I had looking at some of the students' evidence that I had collected, some data, and I just remember leaving that conversation thinking that this was my first true difficult conversation, in the sense that not about the things that were said, but how they were received, I think, looking at data. And that was something that I saw also as I worked with other teachers, because essentially that information, numbers, data don't lie. And I think that might be the first time or first experiences that teachers have had to have kind of authentic conversations around what is happening in class based on the parameters that coach and that teacher have set around what is happening, whether it's looking at something more standards aligned to kind of student engagement, but having that captured and then having to look and then kind of face it, I think is very, can be very hard for teachers if they've never had to do that in their practice. So I remembered that, and I remember seeing how that conversation was going and realizing that because I already had like the plan in my mind that we're going to look at this and then we're going to have some outcomes and some goals that we're going to set, and then thinking about then what are some strategies that I can come in and model to then see Sasha then implement to hopefully then have some impact on that student evidence. And then it was just, I realized in that conversation, just stop. We need to check in because my plan is not the plan that was needed in that moment. And really realizing that these are people too that we're working with. And it's not just about you have this great plan and you've done relationship building and now we're here, but also checking in on that human side to see where we're at, how we're feeling. And so I would say that, because I've talked with other coaches in districts in the States, other coaches in schools on the international scene, and some coaching programs tend to be on the more clinical side, where it's just, here's the number, here's the data, and how we're going to get, which is important, but I think something is lost in that human relationship, the human connections on the surface don't seem to be addressed and nurtured, I think, as much as they should or could be, to have true collaboration and I think personal, professional growth, all at the impact of students and their learning. So that was kind of a pivotal moment for me to kind of see that conversation play out and just reflect on it still, in terms of it's fine to pause that. My plan, as if you will, to really just check in at, like, how are we doing as an individual? How are we doing as a partnership? And then really just being in that moment to then say what is going on and how can we move forward from here in a supportive way. And I know we did address, the student evidence that we received and continued the work, but it looked different than what I had already planned out in my mind in terms of our work together. So I think that would be, my 2 cents for coaches and teachers as well, just to not be afraid of the evidence that they're collecting, that they're receiving, and in no way is it a reflection really on kind of what you're doing, but how can you then take that current reality to then continue to move students forward, if this is what the evidence is truly showing, where we are at as a classroom community. How can they grow from that point?
Sasha, do you remember the conversation that he's talking about?
I think so. It was, do you want me to give you the specifics of what we were looking at?
Whatever you feel comfortable sharing, because he's got me so curious, and I know he's being so kind and not laying it all out there and really talking around it. So I'll let you decide exactly what you want to share, but I'm just curious if that was a pivotal moment for you too, if you were like, I'm just, guessing, like there was some data that maybe could have made you feel uncomfortable, right? Because it was maybe not something you were expecting or was not what you wanted to see, and how he took that information, but then also made that personal connection with you to let you know that, hey, I know that this is not super fun right now, but we're in it together and we're going to move forward. And just like you just said, Aaron, we're going to deal with, this reality and work towards student growth, and we're going to do it together. So I'm just curious if you remember that experience and how it felt for you and what kind of takeaways you had in that moment as well.
I'm not sure about that particular one. It could be what I'm thinking of. But I know once we'd gotten to a certain point, we started looking at student evidence. And I didn't know what that was going to be about, except it was going to be a bad reflection on me. And so that was all, because these are the things that I'm always worried about, And it was difficult to see the evidence on paper, because when you see something on paper, then you can't deny what is there. There's no two ways around it. Data is data. And so I had to kind of decide, okay, this isn't great. We're not it certainly revealed a lot that I wasn't aware of. And so that was another hurdle to overcome. As I think probably for Aaron, it was more like, okay, I realize that you're not probably fully ready to accept what the evidence is saying, right? So how can we get you to the point then where this will be okay? It's not an indictment. It's not a death sentence. But this is information. And so I guess it was always the questioning and just the acknowledgement. I think one of the things with Aaron is that he's pretty transparent. So he says what it is that we're going to be doing. What's the focus? Always. And so that's helped me to switch the way I think about my teaching. It's not about me. It's about the students that I'm with. I have a responsibility to them. How am I going to ensure that I fulfill that responsibility to them? Is this fair for them? Is this right that this is what they're getting? How can I improve what I'm doing? So you have good intentions, and then you have data that shows you what the reality is. And you can make a decision about how you're going to treat that information moving forward. And for me, it was the fact that he was questioning the fact that it was not an indictment, and the language that he used that showed that, I'm not judging you, but this is what we have. What can we do with it? Mm-hmm. And so that makes me feel more comfortable. And that's what I take now as my standard when I'm working with somebody. I don't know any more than you. We are colleagues, and this is a situation that we're going to work on together. There's always a scope for growth. And how can I support you in that? So that's what I take away from him. That's what I take into my practice. That's what helps me to feel that this evidence is not the end of the world.
So many of the things both of you have said are so powerful and so important. I really appreciate the point you made, Sasha, about Aaron being so transparent about, not only is this not an indictment of you, but that I don't necessarily have the answers and we're going to work through it together. And that is making me think of a lot of conversations that Sasha and I have had where she, as now the coach, feels a lot of pressure to have all the answers all the time, right? So I'm hoping, Sasha, you're having a moment in your head right now and thinking, oh, that was one of the most powerful things that Aaron did for me, was being on the journey with me instead of being the expert. And I think that's a real kind of like mind shift and a real challenge for coaches too. So testament to Aaron for being able to keep that focus on, we're going through this together. This is the data we have. We're colleagues. We're going to work through it together. Thank you so much for watching this video today. If this was helpful for you in any way, please head over to our website for the Coach Microcredential. As coaches, we know we can always coach better. And this academic year-long program is an amazing opportunity to help you level up your coaching skills with the support of your own mentor. I know that I'm telling you that as the premium mentor for the coach, so it doesn't mean that much, but I'm going to let you hear from one of the coach participants right now so you can see why they think you should join the coach.
I was a little bit nervous about jumping into the role of a coach at my school, but the Coach Microcredential has given me so much confidence, and I'm learning so much to be ready to help the teachers at my school in this first year of my coaching.
Are you ready to take your coaching skills to the next level? Join the next cohort of the coach and make it happen.